What up, dude bros? I'm Frank. This is a group review of 3 new rival blasters. The Pathfinder, a spring-powered pump-action blaster using removable magazines. The Vision, a spring-powered pistol with a built-in magazine with a capacity of 8 rounds. And the Fate, a spring-powered single-shot breech-loading pistol. And all 3 blasters have adjustable sights with these cool mock fiber-optic front sights. They also include the new Acura rounds, but these blasters are compatible with normal Nerf rival rounds as well. So let's get into it. Included with the Pathfinder is the blaster, magazine, balls, and instructions. Included with the Vision is the blaster, balls, and instructions. Included with the Fate is the blaster, balls, and instructions. External overview of each blaster one by one, starting out with the Pathfinder. Starting up at the front, there's no in-strike barrel lug. This is a rival blaster. Above the muzzle is the front sight. It has this fiber optic-esque look and looks pretty snazzy. And behind that is the rear sight, which is adjustable on this blaster. The adjustable iron sights are one of the selling gimmicks of this new sub-series within Rival. The rear sight is a standard loop, but there are 2 adjustment wheels for windage and elevation. The front adjustment wheel would be your windage, so it moves the sight right and left. And this bigger wheel, which is accessible from the right and the left, is for your elevation, which means you can move the sight up and down to compensate for your barrel angle. It's pretty fun to adjust the settings, but don't take it too seriously, because after playing and slamming the blaster around, I lost my zero pretty quickly. That is the rear adjustable sight. Both sights are fixed into the blaster. They're not removable, and there are no tack rails on the top of this blaster. Moving on, down here we have the priming handle. This is a spring-powered blaster to prime. You do that. The prime strength required is in line with other rival blasters on the market, but I actually think this is easier to prime than something like the Apollo. Because it's more classic ergonomics, it's just easier to do this. And it's a pretty smooth prime action. Moving back to the magazine and the magazine well, to get the mag out, you strike this massive flappy paddle right here, and that lets you take the magazine out. The included magazine holds 12 Nerf rival rounds. It is the same form factor as the standard tube mags, so your Apollo magazine, your other rival magazines will work with the Pathfinder. And other than it being opaque orange instead of painted clear, it's essentially the same. And they also added a little rubber ring at the bottom of the mag, not really certain what it's for. Moving on to the trigger pull is pretty standard. This blaster does not have slam fire. Above the trigger is a trigger lock or a safety. When it's in the forward position, it's locked, you're not able to fire, then you pull it back, and you're able to fire. Trigger safety is only on the right-hand side, it is not on the left. But over on the left-hand side is a reset button right here. So after you prime the blaster, you're not able to prime it again. This is an override if you need to clear out certain types of jams and malfunctions. It works like all the other reset buttons on Nerf blasters. And now down to the grip. Overall, this is a pretty comfortable grip. It's ergonomic, smooth, nice to hold. It's also very long, so even if you have super fat, chubby fingers, you'll have plenty of room on this grip. However, it's not as thick and girthy as something like the Apollo, because the magazine is not going up through the grip. So it's a more reasonable girth, but it has all the length you need. It is factually impossible to talk about length and girth without giggling. But overall, a comfortable grip that should be welcoming to almost any hand type. So overall, good, comfy grip. Moving on, up here we have a priming indicator on the right and the left-hand side of the blaster right here. A little orange flag pops up indicating primed, ready to fire. Now back to the stock. This is a fixed-in-place, non-removable stock. It's pretty short in length, and it also has a pretty small butt pad, so there's not a whole lot of surface area making contact with your shoulder. That is an external overview of the Pathfinder. Now moving to the external overview of the Vision. Starting up at the front, there's no in-strike barrel lug. On top of that is the front sight, which looks very similar to the other 2 sights. Just like the others, the front sight is not adjustable at all. But behind that is the rear sight, which is adjustable. To adjust this sight, you just push on the sight and it moves. So you can push this sight up and down this little ramp, which is adjusting for elevation. Then you can wiggle the sight right and left to adjust for windage. And I found when I put the sight somewhere, it actually held at 0, better than the Pathfinder sight. So it's a little clunkier and less tactical to adjust this sight, but it actually holds at 0, and that's what a sight is supposed to do. And these sights are also permanently built into the blaster, not removable, and there's no tack rail on top of this blaster either. Moving on to the built-in magazine. To load this up, you get this little slide and you lock it all the way down to the bottom, and then it clicks into place down here. Then you can just push your balls in and it holds Then you can just push your balls in like that, and it holds 8 balls. Once you've loaded it up, you release the bottom slider, and then the spring activates. Then you want to push this up and lock it in the top position. Now I'm loaded up, ready to fire 8 times in a row. This is not a removable magazine like on the Pathfinder. This one is built in. But I can confirm, once you chamber around, you can pull off the spring tension, and you have one chambered. So you're able to point the blaster primed, ready to go as you're reloading, unlike with the Chronos. Moving on, back to the trigger. The trigger pull is pretty standard. This blaster does not have slam fire. Behind the trigger is the trigger safety, or the lock, lock, which is present on the right and the left-hand side. When the switch is in the down position, it's locked and safe, unable to fire. Then you raise it up, and you're able to fire. Now down to the grip. This grip is nice and beefy, nice and big, so if you're an adult or a bigger person, it's a pretty comfortable grip for you. However, this grip angle is severely slanted forward and very unusual for a pistol. It is not an objectively bad grip angle, but it is unusual. When I intuitively point this blaster, I'm pointing up in the air because this grip angle is so far off of every other Nerf gun I own. It's very unusual and requires your wrist to go down in a funny angle. That is a subjective complaint on my end. You might like this grip angle. And at the bottom of the grip, we have this tiny little hole which you could fit string through, but it's not a proper sling mount at all. Moving on, we have an unjamming button right here. And now back to the priming handle. To prime, you pull back and you manually push forward. There's no spring return. Now the prime strength required is actually similar to other rival blasters, but it's way easier to prime this than something like the Chronos. Because you have this giant handle, I can get 3 fingers in there and pull back really easily. Compared to the Chronos, which requires hand muscles to grip into the slide before you even prime it back. So it feels harder than it actually is to prime the Chronos. And that concludes the external overview of the Vision. Finally, the external overview of the Fate, the single-shot pistol. Starting up at the front, there's no in-strike barrel lug. 3-in-1 video, this is over the top. Above that is the front sight, which has the same design that looks kind of like fiber optic. It's a series theme, you get it? And in the back, we have again an adjustable rear sight. This sight is only adjustable for elevation, not for windage. And that works by sliding it up and down this little ramp to change the elevation of the sight. And now to the breech, which is how you load this blaster. When you prime this blaster back, the breech actually flies open. To load the breech, you can load in your single rival round like that. When your round is in there, you manually push forward, and now you're primed, ready to fire. Loading in your rounds is pretty straightforward. It's not as easy as a front loader, but it's super simple after you do it a dozen or so times. And again, this is a single shot blaster intended to fire just one ball at a time. Moving back to the trigger pull is pretty standard. This blaster does not have slam fire. And up here, we have a trigger lock or a trigger safety. In the forward position, it's locked. You're not able to pull the trigger. Then you move it back, and you can. And now down to the grip. Overall, this is a very comfortable grip. It's not as big as the Pathfinder grip, but it's still welcoming to a mature or adult hand. It doesn't look fancy or unusual, but it's very comfortable on the hand. And no sling or lanyard mount on the bottom of this grip. Now moving up to the priming handle, this is a T-style priming handle to prime. You do that. Like I said, when you prime this blaster, the breech opens itself. There's no way to deactivate that, but it saves you a step when you reload instead of having to manually open up the breech, would just get annoying. The prime strength required, similar to the Vision, is probably similar to other rival blasters, but this is way easier to prime back. And I think this has a smoother prime than the Vision because this priming rod is a little more narrow. And again, you waste no effort like on the Chronos gripping the thing. You can just cling your fingers right on there and pull back. It's really easy to prime this one. And no priming indicator on this one like the other two, but if that's not obvious enough, get some new glasses, bro. That is an external overview of the Fate. It's a pretty simple blaster. That is an external overview of all 3 blasters. Now, a brief overview of the new ammo. Nerf calls these Rival Accu rounds, and they say they're the most accurate Rival rounds available. They are the same size as standard Nerf Rival rounds. They're just blue instead of yellow, and they are totally cross-compatible. You can use standard Rival rounds in these new blasters, and you can use the new Accu rounds in your normal Rival blasters just fine. It's sort of like Elite Dart with AccuStrike Dart, how they're cross-compatible, but one's more accurate than the other, or so they claim. In my tests, I've not noticed any difference at all with these new rounds. Maybe I need to do more testing, but they seem just as accurate, and they have the same chrono averages as the standard Rival rounds. Their composition is pretty much the same, but they do have visibly different little dimples on the rounds. The dimples on the Accu rounds are way bigger and more noticeable, and you can even feel it in your fingers that they're just different. However, through my testing, I haven't seen any performance difference at all. So they say they're new and more accurate, but in my testing, they're exactly identical to normal Rival rounds in performance. They visually look different, but who cares about looks? We want it to shoot in a straight line. So yeah, that's an overview of the new rounds. Now I'll show you all 3 blasters firing. Starting with the new blue balls. Now shooting some regular yellow Rival rounds. Starting with some blue balls. Now standard yellow Rival rounds. starting with blue balls. Now shooting standard yellow rival rounds. So operating these blasters went largely as expected. They performed just like other rival blasters out on the market. Operating the Pathfinder was really fun. I found this priming mechanism to be a little easier over sustained periods compared to something like the Apollo. There's nothing wrong with the Apollo, it's just a little weird to prime like this. Pump action is very classic and my hands are very used to it. So I enjoyed the play experience with the Pathfinder and I did not experience any jams or malfunctions with this blaster. But nothing else worth mentioning, it operates as you'd expect a blaster like this to operate. Operating the Vision was a little bit awkward. I did not experience any jams or malfunctions even with this magazine system, which is pretty cool. However, this priming handle is a little flimsy. It didn't feel really crisp pulling it back every time. And I also got annoyed with the manual return. There's no spring return, so you have to do that every time. That was annoying for me. And the grip angle is super far forward, which gives it a very unusual feel. This whole blaster is just unusual and just wonky. And finally, play experience with the Fate went just as expected. I did not experience any jams or malfunctions. Priming this one through sustained fire was pretty easy. I do like the priming handle. Ergonomically, it works really well for an extended play experience. And now to the chrono results. First up, the Pathfinder. With the new rounds achieved an average velocity of 89 feet per second, with standard yellow Nerf rival rounds also 89 feet per second. Now to the Vision, with the new rounds, 91 feet per second, with standard yellow rival rounds 92 feet per second. And finally the Fate, with the included rounds 96 feet per second, with standard yellow rival rounds 95 feet per second. The Nerf rival par is between 90 and 100 FPS, so the Pathfinder shooting a hair slow, and the Fate is shooting surprisingly well for a single shot blaster. But they're all quite reasonable for the rival series. And the difference between the rounds and the standard yellow rival rounds was pretty insignificant. To repeat myself, I did not observe any performance difference at all with the new rounds compared to standard yellow Nerf rival rounds. Consistency, velocity, accuracy, range, anything, they're pretty much the same. That is the objective information I can provide on these blasters. Now to my personal opinion, one by one. Starting out with the Pathfinder, overall my opinion is pretty positive on this blaster. It operates smoothly, no jams or malfunctions, firing velocity is on the slower side, but it's not terrible. And it's a lot of fun to use. It's a lot of fun to tactically reload, and you feel like an operator, especially with this giant mag release. It looks like an amazing SMG, and it holds like one. It's very fun to play with this one. My biggest complaint on the Pathfinder is the stock. I'm kind of disappointed. It's a static stock. It's not adjustable. It's not removable. I can't throw on one that fits my body. It's way too tiny. Visually, I think it's too tiny, and ergonomically, it's also way too small. My next complaint is these sights. I grew bored of them pretty quickly. Now, it is a selling feature of this sub-series, is the adjustable sights. That's the whole gimmick here. But I'm just arguing this blaster would have been better without them. I think a flat mono rail with an adjustable stock would have made this blaster so much cooler. And you totally have space. You could have added more tack rails up along here for a flashlight or something cool. But they didn't. They permanently attached these sights, and I think that's the coolest little gimmick about the blaster, but it's also going to be the thing that makes you grow bored of it and move on to something else, I think. Now to my personal opinion on the Vision. Overall, I'm not super stoked about this blaster. I will not be using this in any battles. It's just too wonky for my taste. And I'm a pretty wonky dude. For me, if a pistol can't fit into a holster, it's useless. I don't care about these really oversized pistols. It just doesn't fit my playstyle. And the priming handle is kind of wobbly and flimsy, and it just doesn't give me a great deal of confidence using this blaster hard and fast. And you know me, I gotta go fast. And it has this whole space laser vibe. It looks really interesting, like an alien might use it, but it's just not comfortable for me. But it mechanically works just fine, no jams or malfunctions, and reasonable firing performance. And finally, the Fate. My overall opinion on this one is pretty positive. No jams and malfunctions, and pretty reasonable firing performance. I'm actually quite satisfied with this one. It's very simple to use, it's very basic, the priming handle is comfortable, and it doesn't take a whole lot of pressure to prime this one. This is especially important if you have small and or weak hands. When my nephew tried to prime back the Chronos when he was age 6 or 7, his hand was too weak to grip this priming handle and to prime it back. And it's not really the prime force that makes this one so difficult to prime, it's the grip. Compared to the Fate with the T-style priming handle, this one is really easy to prime. So if you're trying to get into Rival and you can't handle the Chronos, check this one out. And this grip is also super comfortable. The Fate is just a fun blaster to play with. Granted, it's a single shot breech loader, so it's not going to win you any wars as a primary, but it's fun to use. So overall opinion on the Fate is pretty high. So that is my review and opinion on the new Rival blasters. If you'd like to purchase any of these, I'll put buy links in the description box below. And in full disclosure, Hasbro did send all 3 of these blasters over to me free of charge. I did not buy these with my own money. That's it for this video. Thanks so much for watching, bros, and as always, stay tactical.